everyone. This is Sarah
Hello.
and
And
Scott.
I'm Scott. It's Scott. I'm Scott. Hi.
And we are here at the Beatles Beat with three of my good friends, the three Beatle babes, Patti, Marti, and Pat. We're glad to have you on today.
Glad to be here.
Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for
Now,
having
last
me with you.
time, Scott and I were talking about my book, Dear Beatle People, the story of the Beatles' North American fan clubs. And you three are three of the main people that I interviewed for the book. So I just thought it'd be great to have you guys come on and tell your stories and talk about your experiences running a fan club for the Beatles or a Beatle-ish fan club in Patty's case. And just talk a little bit more because my book kind of gives an overview of it, but your books really dig into the whole story and give the complete picture. So I want everyone to know about those.
Yeah. Before we get started, Patti, I noticed Paul happens to be behind you. Is that the actual Paul McCartney or is that a cardboard cutout?
Oh, that's the actual Paul McCartney. He lives in my foyer. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So right now you're in what, around 1964 during your time traveling adventures?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. I just want to make sure. Okay. Can you do me a favor since you're back in 1964? Can you buy some real estate for me in London and New York? I'll pay you back.
Well, thank you.
All right. In fact, buy some for yourself too. Buy some for everybody.
Just get John Lennon to come visit me. That'll be fine.
All right, good enough.
Just have a goodbye. Yeah.
All right, let's get rolling.
Paranormal show.
So, Marti, I was going to start talking with you first. Tell us a little bit about the fan club that you had in 1964.
Well, actually, I was in Chicago, and we had a little bit of kind of a unique situation there because VJ Label was there, and they started producing or they started promoting several of the Beatles songs before anybody else did. And the WLS radio station that was in Chicago picked up on it and started playing them in the spring of '63. So there was a group of us. We were at the Art Institute. I used to take art classes down in the summer. And we'd walk over and listen to the Beatles. So we became there was a broad fan club base there. When I went back to high school in the fall, there was 6 girls. We all loved the Beatles already. And so naturally we became the fan club. So I actually started the fan club when I was 15 in 1963. And one of the girls' father worked on the paper, Park Forest Star, and he would put little articles in the paper for us. It didn't just go out to Park Forest people. That was our community. It went out to surrounding areas. So by Christmas, we had over 500 members in this fan club already. And you realize that they hadn't even been on the Ed Sullivan Show yet. That wasn't until '64. So Chicago had a big base of fans, Beatle fans, before the Ed Sullivan Show. And I remember sitting on the floor watching Ed Sullivan with my legs crossed, just looking at the Beatles and saying, "Mom, I'm going to meet them." And she just laughed. I said, "Mom, I'm going to meet them. I know I'm going to meet them. I know I can do it." "Well, you and about 50,000 other girls want to meet them." I said, "Yeah, but I'm going to figure out a way to do it." Anyway, we ran this fan club and we did a lot of activities with it. It was really a learning experience to run such a large fan club because you had to talk on the phone to people, write letters, organize. There was no social media. We had a phone relay. And what we do is I had 10 people to call. They each had 10 people to call and so forth. And it was like a phone relay. If we wanted to do a rally, we would get on the phone and start calling. And in maybe 2 weeks, we could all meet at the park. It would take that long to get everybody organized. But we did. We did a lot of things with the community and trying to take cooking, cookies and things to the senior citizens and getting Beatle fans there too. But we had a real good time running the fan club. At a certain point, my mother had to go to the post office in the little adjoining town next to us and get us a post office box. I wasn't old enough to get a post office box. So she got a post office box for us, and this little poor post office in Richmond Park had all this Beatle mail coming in, and they said to me, "What is all this?" I said, we're a fan club, and I had all this mail coming. We had to read it, and we never charged dues. The only thing we asked was for them to sign up, and we would send them our first newsletter. And as far as we could take it, because we ran out of money eventually. We were doing things like babysitting and after school jobs and putting all our money into it to try to keep it going. But it was difficult after a while because we got to over 1,000 members. So so we started our fan club in 63, actually. And then I went on with it through 64. And then one of the girls in Chicago Heights took it over when I left, because I left to go to college. And so she took it over. Mm-hmm.
Well,
that was the story of how I started.
Well, let's look at a picture of someone who was really important and how you got to meet the Beatles. And it's the man standing here in the middle.
Okay.
And that is Derek Taylor, of course, the Beatles press officer in 1964. How did you get to meet Derek Taylor?
Well, this is funny. We had called Triangle Productions, was bringing them to Chicago. We had talked to people. We had gotten passes. It was a pass inviting us. And I had asked for 7 people to be admitted through Triangle. And they sent me a little invitation in the mail. I got it like the week before the Beatles were to be there. So that week, where I was afraid to tell everybody because I just had this premonition that something was going to happen. But that same week, just a few days, 2 or 3 days before the Beatles, because they were there on Saturday, we got a telephone call from Triangle Productions saying all these invitations had been recalled, and that only people that had a legitimate press pass were going to be allowed into the concert. I mean, into into their press conference. So I didn't know what to do, because we had this honorary plaque that we wanted to present. I had met a lot of people working down at WLS, and one of the ladies that I met was Lee Phillips, that had a TV show. So I called her. I said, "We can't present this plaque now. Could you present it for us?" And she said, "Yes." Well, the day of the concert, all of our dads took us downtown. They wouldn't let us go by ourselves. We all went in this big station wagon, waving pictures of our favorite Beatles and singing songs. And the poor dads, they were probably, but then they started singing songs too with us. So there you go. But we got to park, and we went, and my dad had been with Armour and Company. So it was the Stockyardians was where the press conference was to be. Right next door to it was the amphitheater where the Beatles were going to perform. And so he knew the Stockyardians real well because he had gone to many meetings down there. He said to us, "Come on, let's go into the bar instead of standing in line." Well, we had shoulder to shoulder. We were like inching our way through the lobby of this Stockyard Inn's hotel. And I saw Lee Phillips, and she had my plaque in her arms. She waved to me. So we get into this bar, and my dad sits us down and orders Cokes and chips for all of us. And we're sitting there. Two of the girls went into the, or three of the girls went into the concert. They didn't want to come into the bar. So I'm sitting there thinking, you know, we need to go get the girls. We need to have us all together here in case. And Linda goes, in case Linda was with me and Jan was with me. We turn around to go talk to our dads because I was going to give my dad my ticket to go into the concert and get the other girls. And all of a sudden, Linda starts screaming. And I'm going, you can't scream in here. It's a bar. That's what I told her. And I said, what are you screaming about? And she turned around and she goes, look who's talking to your dad and my dad. And it was Derek Taylor. And we said, oh my God, it's Derek. So we jumped up so fast that we knocked the table over and all the Cokes went flying. And we run up to this poor Derek Taylor standing at the bar and we're going, Mr. Taylor, we want to present. And he goes, wait, how did you girls get in this bar? Well, how are you in here? So my dad said, oh, this is my daughter. And I had her come and sit down at the bar. And he said, she has a large fan club and they were invited, but then the invitations were recalled. So I had the invitation with me and I showed it to him. And he says, I says, what do you want to do? I says, we want to present this plaque. He says, well, where's the plaque? Well, then I had to head for the high hills and go find the plaque out in the lobby with all these camera people and cameramen. And anyway, I found Lee Phillips and I just sort of pulled the darn plaque right out of her arms. I said, I'll explain later, Lee. I'm going to show this to Derek Taylor. So I ran into the bar hoping that he was still there, and he had waited for me. I showed him the plaque. He said, oh my goodness, this is a lovely plaque. Why don't you girls just present it to the boys yourselves? And I was ready to like keel over when he said that. I said, are you kidding? Can we really? Yes, you can, but it's upstairs. So he took a piece of paper. It said the Stockyard Inn's on the top of it. And he wrote, this is a fan club. Please admit them to the press conference, Derek Taylor. And he handed it to me. He said, see you upstairs. So I said to my dad, we got to go get the other girls. He goes, there's no time. People are lining up to go to the press conference. So we went out and we stood there and they had the Andy Frayne ushers right in front of us, trying, blocking everybody, only allowing one at a time to go with their press pass. I get up to them, got Linda on one side, Jan on the other. Our three dads were standing behind us. And I said, here's a note from Derek Taylor. Well, that meant nothing to the Andy Frayne usher, who was like in his 20s. He had no idea what I was talking about. I said, no, really, we can go upstairs, look. And he pushed it to the side. He didn't even want to look at it. So with that, my dad took my shoulders and they took the other girl's shoulders and gave us a shove. And we went trampling right over the poor Andy Frayne usher and right up the steps. And I'm looking, and the usher's saying to me, come back here. You're not supposed to be there. And I looked at my dad. He says, keep going, keep going. So I went upstairs. And that's where we got to go to the press conference and meet the Beatles. And it was because of Derek Taylor meeting him in the bar after all this work that we had done, trying to officially attain, admittance to the press conference. So it was sort of luck.
Cool.
That's
a couple of quick
was.
questions. One, was your dad just friendly and talking to any strangers that he met at the bar? Or did he actually know that was Derek Taylor and he was like...
He had no idea that it was Derek Taylor. And when I came over to him, He went, oh, he was as surprised as I was. Why are you guys here? And I said, this is Derek Taylor, their press manager. Oh, he didn't know. And then he told Derek who we were at press conference, wanted to go to the press conference to present the plaque. Yeah, he had no idea.
So my next question is,
because the men would just go to the bar and talk to each other,
We could all understand people, you and other people recognizing John, Paul, George, and Ringo. That's a given, okay? But how in the world are you recognizing their press officer?
Oh my gosh, we knew everybody that surrounded them. We knew their faces, who they were. Mal, we knew all their press people, all their roadies, everybody. We knew them because we went through teen magazines constantly, soaking up this information and looking at these pictures. We'd buy these magazines, and one of them was to cut up and put on our wall, and the other one was to sit with the fan club members, going through them and taking notes as to people, who should we contact? Who should we write to? Blah, blah, blah. So it was sort of like, we knew all these people that surrounded the Beatles.
Now, we know that Brian, in a way, became a celebrity unto himself, right? I mean, he was being interviewed, stuff like that. But when you're able to recognize somebody like Derek or maybe somebody like Mal, is it because they happen to be in the pictures with the Beatles? And you're like, oh, who's that guy? Or were they also promoted as well? Like, hey, here's Derek Taylor. Go ahead.
Well, they would say under the picture who these people were that were in the picture in the book. So we would understand who they were, Yeah.
Incredible.
And Derek Taylor had his own column in 16 magazine, The Beatles and Me. I don't know if that was after, I don't remember what year, but he had his own little column in 16 magazine for a while.
I remember that. Yeah, he did.
Him and
also,
Neil
years
Armstrong,
later,
I think they kind of took turns writing a little blurb. So you would kind of know who they were when you read those.
It was funny too. I wanted to tell, I don't think I've ever said this one, but years later, I can't say a lot of years later, it must have been 2 years later. I was at a dance out in Park Forest at a junior high. And guess who was performing at that dance? The Byrds.
Oh.
And so I'm looking around and I see Derek Taylor standing over there on the side. I quickly wrote him a note. I said, you helped me meet the Beatles. I presented them with a plaque in 1964, and I passed the note down. This kid passed it, this kid passed it, this kid passed it. And he got the note and he said, oh, yes, I remember. Come on over. And he had me come over and talk to him. And so I talked to him and now he was the Byrds. He was the manager for the Byrds. I didn't know if you ever knew that. He became their manager a couple of years later.
What year was this?
I'm thinking 65 or 66. I'm not sure.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And so I got to meet all the Byrds because he had me go up and meet them also. So it was funny, but I recognized him standing there.
Amazing.
At this junior high school dance. I wasn't in junior high school, but I just went to the dance because I wanted to see the Byrds,
Well, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what do we need to know about this photo? This is an interesting photo here, isn't it?
It is.
This is Derek. He's bending over and he's saying to me, as soon as I can, I'm going to introduce your group up. Now, was it the Chicagoland Beatle People fan club? That's what he's asking me. And I said, yes, it was. And I'm talking to him. And just right after he turned around, I realized my knees were locked. How was I going to get up on this platform? I was so scared that my knees were locked together. And actually, Jan and Linda had to help me up on the platform because my knees were like, ugh.
frozen in fear.
So I
What
stood up.
can you,
I
what
stood
can you
up on
tell
the
us about that?
platform.
What can you tell us about that attractive
Excuse me?
outfit that you're wearing?
That black jumper with a Peter Pan collar. Is that
Okay.
what?
Yeah.
Is it black and white, or is it just because it's a
It's
black and white
a
photo?
it's a black jumper with a white Peter Pan undershirt, blouse, and it's a Peter
Yeah.
Pan collar, and that was pretty popular back then to
Mhm.
wear stuff like that. I think, don't you think,
I
Patty and Pat?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, Mark, in this picture, you just look like you are the happiest person. Like that had to be one of the happiest moments of your life. Or at least the happiest
Oh, it
moments up
was.
until that point. You just look at the look on her face.
Look at my
Like, the Beatles are
face.
so
I wish
close
it
to
looked
you.
like that now. Yeah, I was like, and you can see Jan. She's standing. She's got a plaid jacket on, and Linda's on
Okay.
the other side of me. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we were just like
In
in,
heaven.
Well,
on
let's
cloud
look at the
nine.
picture. Let's look at the picture where you're actually giving them the
Wait.
plaque.
can I just say
So I
something?
actually was able to stand up. Go ahead. Go ahead,
Can I
Pat.
just say something about the jumper you're wearing? That outfit, it became popular on American Bandstand because the kids on there, a lot of them went to Catholic school, and that looked
Uh-huh.
like their uniform, and
Right.
that became popular. Because I had that outfit too, but I never went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I-
that's how it became
yeah.
popular. Anyway,
Yeah, I went to Catholic school and I wore those uniforms in grade school and in high school,
Mhm.
and they were different colored jumpers and
Yeah.
shirts under it. And just one quick thing I have to say is that when they would be on American Bandstand was in black and white. So the Catholic schoolgirls would wear a sweater, an open cardigan sweater over their uniforms, so you wouldn't see the school insignia, because the nuns would watch that show and see what girls were on it, and then they would get detention the next day.
Oh,
Oh
no.
my gosh.
Yes,
That's
yes, we weren't
terrible.
allowed. So you
Well,
couldn't see the colors, on black and white
Yeah.
bandstand.
Well, mine wasn't a school uniform. It was just a black jumper with a white blouse under it.
Yeah.
And you can see that Jan had a plaid jacket on. In fact, Ringo asked her about that jacket. He said, "Where did you buy your jacket?" That's what he asked her. She goes, "Are you kidding?" And she goes, "Just at the store." She didn't know what to say. But anyway, so I did make it up on the platform and I presented the plaque. I hadn't planned anything, what to say, because I never knew until the very last minute that we were going to actually get to do this. So I presented the plaque to him and I said, "From all your Beatle fans here in Chicago, we present this honorary plaque to you." Okay. And I said to John, "And take it because it's very heavy." That's what I told him. And he goes, "Oh, heavy hay. Okay, well, I'll take it before you drop it." That's what he told me. So you can see he's holding on to the plaque because I felt like I was going to drop it. And then Ringo is reading it. And then here I have a close-up. I wanted to show you this. I don't think you ever saw this one. If I hold it up, can you see it?
Yeah.
See, that's
Oh, yeah.
that's
Mhm.
Ringo
Oh, wow.
reading the plaque up close. I have a lot of pictures that I didn't put in the book. Not a lot, but several. So you can see he's reading the plaque and John's looking at him like, I don't know, he's got a weird look on his face. I think it's kind of neat that John's doing that. And so then
Did he read it? Did he read the plaque out loud?
no, he
Or was
didn't. He didn't read the plaque out. Nobody read the plaque out loud. It said to what? I'm gonna forget it. 4 guys who with fun-loving ways have earned this plaque in recognition of outstanding worldwide musical achievement from your loving fans in Chicago, the Chicagoland Beatle people. That's what it
Right.
said. But nobody read it out loud. I just said, here's the plaque from our club, basically. And so then, so that was when I presented the plaque to the Beatles. And later, these people in the front of this picture, if you see the far right lower edge, that's Ron Riley from WLS. And then you can see another person with the blonde hair, a lady. I think that's Lee Phillips. She was the one that was going to present it. And then a cameraman. But these people ask us to come down to the front of the table, and they were interviewing us. And the Beatles are standing behind us, probably thinking, why are these girls being interviewed? It's because we knew all these DJs, and they were asking us, wow, girls, you did it, you made it. You know, that's what type of questions they were asking us. And I remember Jan said, I'm numb, I feel numb. And I said, so do I. And John pinched her arm, and he pinched my arm too. And he says, you feel that, don't you? And I went, no, I don't. I was like totally numb. You know,
well, it's a good story. You know, I mean, if you're a journalist, you want to be able to try to find different types of stories. And the idea that, you know, here are these four musicians from, you know, the other, you know, another continent, right? Another from England, and here you guys are with this huge. I mean, I don't even know how much about fan clubs. Maybe Sarah, you could answer this. Has there ever been any groups, fan clubs, that have been as big as the Beatles? I mean, Elvis probably, but did the Beach Boys have an equivalent that you know of? I mean, who else would have been close?
Elvis had a big fan club.
Elvis, of course, that's a given, yeah. But who else?
But no other groups. I mean, the Monkees had a big fan club when that was after.
I think Ricky Nelson had a lot of fan clubs back in the day. He was very popular right around before, like right during Elvis or after Elvis. He had a lot of girls after him, a lot of fans, if I recall.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned Ricky Nelson, right? We talked about Elvis a little bit. Whenever I see things like this, and you realize, and the Beatles themselves have said this, haven't they, about how fortunate they were to have been in this circumstance together, where they can, you know, keep each other from going crazy. Because you can imagine poor Elvis, right? I mean, who else could he talk to after a press conference who could even relate to him, right? Or Ricky Nelson and so many others. It's like, it's so much better to have had this little pod where they could rely on each other and understand each other. Because it's an unusual thing. As much fun as it looks, it's not so much fun when you have complete strangers thinking they know your inner thoughts and they want to marry you and you know, they want to know everything about your life. And it's a little unusual being famous.
Yeah. Well, and so right after this conference, after we got off the stage, you know, they asked questions, and it didn't last that much longer. I know George's sister was in the audience, so he introduced her and she waved. And then Derek told us, wait a minute. And so everybody was leaving and the Beatles left, and he said, follow the press. You're going to be surprised. Just follow the press and you'll see where you end up. So I followed the press, or the three of us followed the press down this long corridor, and it exited right at the foot on the right hand, on John's side, I should say, of the stage, right in front of all the Andy Frayne ushers, right in front of all the people in the audience. And I got to stand there with the press. I have a picture that was taken. Do you want me to hold that one up and show you?
Sure.
Let's see if I can. Yeah. Okay. So this is at the amphitheater, and I'm standing right below John, right there at the bottom, right down in here. No, that's not John. On the other side here. It's hard to do it when you're looking at a picture. This is John over here. That's where I'm standing. And if you can see up closely, and I know it's hard for Derek Taylor, and I didn't know this until a long time later, he's standing right here in this picture, and George's sister is right over here.
She's with like the big hair.
Yeah, and he's standing there backstage, and I didn't realize this until I had this picture for a long time, that was him standing there. but I was like right below John, right in front of him, right in front of the
It's
amp,
like your
right there.
guardian angel is everywhere.
So Marty, I need to know, did the 3 other girls that didn't go to the bar, were they remain friends with you after all this?
No, they didn't. Because I had that invitation. I should have showed it to them. And I should have said it's been recalled. I didn't. I didn't say to them ahead of time, we have the invitation and it's been recalled. That was my mistake. My dad had kind of advised me, don't get them upset, don't get them all upset because it might be recalled. And it was recalled. So I kind of regret not showing them it right off the bat because they thought that we had planned it for just the, and I said, no. I said, if you had come into the bar, when my dad asked you to come into the bar, instead of standing in line, you would have been upstairs too at the press conference. But they were angry. And can you imagine the ride home in that
Oh,
in that station wagon with the 3 of them angry with me? And I don't blame
that's a
them.
lot of that's a lot of regret. But
Yeah,
I mean,
I
there was
know.
there was a movie once. I don't know if you guys saw it with Gwyneth Paltrow called Closing. Was it called Closing Doors? Sliding Doors. I think it was called Sliding Doors. And the whole movie was, I think it was 2 movies in one, where I think she lost her job or something, and she was going home, and what her life would have been like had she got onto the subway, and what her life would have been like had she not gotten onto the subway. And it's like how her life would have been
Oh,
completely different. Yeah,
yeah,
and you got
I
that.
remember
Yeah, and you
that.
got that in life in general, right? I mean, how many times if you only you would have left the house, or only if you didn't leave the house, or only if you would have gone into the bar, had you not gone into the bar. And so, just one of the lessons in life, but nobody's fault. What can you do?
I just know how
Right.
catty teenage girls can be at
Uh-huh.
16, and how they would take that personally. They wouldn't think,
Oh, they
well, it
did.
was
And
bad
I'm
luck that I didn't go. They would say, yeah, it was Marty set
and
this all up to keep the
I
Beatles to
couldn't
herself.
go and get them. They were already at the they were already in the concert. They had already let them go in. I couldn't physically go get them and get back to where I was. The only hope that I had was that one of the dads would take my ticket and go, and they wouldn't go. So, I mean, I felt really bad. But
I'm sure those
anyway,
girls
so
to this day tell that story. I almost met the Beatles.
yeah, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. Anyway, but
Well, but you
so
got to meet them with Minnesota.
our fan club lasted another, well, with me as president, another year or year and a half or so. And of course, the 3 girls didn't want to participate. So it was Linda and I basically running it because Jan had already gone to college. She was a year ahead of us. So Barb Taberry in Chicago Heights, she had been very active in the club in recent years. And I said, Barb, do you want to take over this club? Because I have to go, I don't know what happened after she took it over, but that was then around the time that you were getting those letters about closing down the clubs, or a lot of the clubs were getting letters cease and desist with unofficial fan clubs and things like that. Well, we didn't have to deal with any of that because our club was so early,
Yeah.
that I don't know what year they started that. I can't recall.
They first sent out some in 1965, but the big one was 1968.
Oh, okay.
But there were a few that were sent out in 1965.
Okay.
Yeah, Louise
Well,
Harrison got one of those for her record that she made. And because she had a fan club about the Beatles. Louise Harrison, George's
Louise
sister,
Harrison.
got a sister Mr. Splitter.
That would have been great.
Aw,
Beatles
that's
lawyers
crazy.
sued Beatles' sister.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they threatened to. She just stopped. But yeah.
I'm getting through your book, and a lot of these stories I didn't know. So they're very interesting.
Well, some of the people that I talked to, like you three, have books, so your stories are out there. Thankfully, I'm glad. But some of these girls that I talked to, I said, "Well, I've never heard about this before," and they said, "Well, no one's ever asked me before. I've never told anyone that this happened, that I met the Beatles." I mean, there's the one story about the girl in Texas that met the Beatles in Houston at a press conference in 1965. And I thought no one met the Beatles in 1965, that they had shut down. But she met them in Houston before after they landed at the airport.
Because I was trying to help Barb. I was trying to help Barb get into the 1965 concert and present them. We had made this big collage for the Beatles. It was really pretty. I never did show it to you. I'm going to send it to you, Sarah. But it was, we were trying to get, I was trying to help them get in. So we were writing letters again to Triangle Productions, and they said, nope, this year, nobody's getting in, and it's going to be only a few press people. So it was pretty well shut down in 65.
Right, and this
you're right about
one fan, she had the biggest fan club at that time in the United States. So they allowed her to come in. She was just her, not any of her members or officers. Just her. It was a special thing, and she gave them cowboy shirts, button-down cowboy shirts. But I never ever heard that story before, and she said no one's ever asked.
Wow.
So that's why I say I could guarantee that there's new stories in my book, because they told me that they never told them to anybody before.
Exactly.
Well, that's why something like this is so important. There's so many great stories out there. I mean, I think when that documentary came out, Good Old Frida, right? I think that just kind of, I mean, unless you're really a diehard Beatles fan, there were a lot of people that were like, what? Who? What was this all about? And it was this whole new story, this whole new area, this whole new aspect that was incredibly fascinating. And had that not been done, it would have just been gone forever. So, the more people share their stories, whether on books or interviews or things like this, the better, because there's always something new to learn.
That's true.
Of course.
All right, so let's change gears a little bit. And Patti, let's talk about the fan club that you had.
Okay. My fan club was different than Marty's and Pat's, like by 360 degrees. We had a fan club for actor Victor Spinetti, who was in all the Beatle movies. And the story behind this was that my girlfriends and I banded together and had a little group of Beatle fans. There were 4 of us. And of course, the way we would get Beatle news is from the newspapers. I was from Philadelphia, and magazines. So we saw the Beatles in person. I saw them in concert on September 2nd, 1964 at Philadelphia Convention Hall. And suddenly the daily newspapers were alive with Beatles kind of news, even the daily papers. So I opened the daily paper and saw that Victor Spinetti, who had just been in A Hard Day's Night, was coming to Philadelphia in a British play called, it was a musical, a satire called Oh, What a Lovely War. And it had been in London for a while. And it was playing in Philly, as many plays did, before they would hit Broadway. So we saw that Victor was coming in late September. So I got excited, and my 3 friends, and I wrote a letter. Now, I don't remember how I found out where he was staying, but he was staying at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, which was one of the chic hotels in town. And I wrote a letter with his name, care of the Bellevue Stratford Hotel. And lo and behold, a week later, I got a letter back from him. He was already there in Philly, preparing for rehearsals. And he was so chatty in the little letter. And he says, oh, I know Beatle fans are my fans. And, please come to the stage door, while we rehearse. And of course, my high school was right in Center City, Philly, which was near the theater district. And so after school for like 2 weeks, my three girlfriends and I would go and visit Victor Spinetti at the stage door. And there were other Beatle fans there too. And he would come out during, it was September, it was warm. He would come out during rehearsals and he would tell us Beatles stories about what happened on the set, et cetera, and which was very sweet of him. And we got to know him a little better. We went to see the play. I remember sitting at the Saturday matinee with my three girlfriends with a sheet cake on my lap. It's like typical fan stuff, So he was leaving Philly to go to New York for Broadway, and we decided we were going to start a fan club. And Victor, of course, had already had a couple fan clubs. He's had some in England. He had one in Brooklyn. I think he had one up in New England, but he was so happy that we were going to start a fan club. So we were the official Victor Spinetti Fan Club of America, Chapter 1, Philadelphia. That was us. And we were a very small fan club. I was co-president along with my friend Diane. We mimeographed newsletters every month about Victor and the Beatles. And it was just people who joined our fan club were from my high school. They were all girls. It was an all girls Catholic high school. And they would say, Victor, who? Oh, come on, join. It's only 50 cents, So they would join the Victor Spinetti fan club, didn't know who he was, but that was fine. So I think we had between like 50 and maybe 70 members, something like that. And we were constantly in contact with Victor. And then we went up to New York to see him when he was in What a Lovely War. If you can imagine in those days, we took the train from Philly up to New York City at 14 and a half years old to go to the theater. It's like, who would do that today? And so he was very nice to us. And it wasn't long after that, when he went back to England, that he found out that he was going to be in the second Beatle movie called Beatles 2. And he was going to go on location with them, which was very exciting. So while he was on location, he would send us letters, because there was no internet, folks. It was either phone calls or letters. So he would send us letters about what was happening, on the set. And we would put it in our little newsletter that was mimeographed and smelled like purple ink. Every month we would have one of those little newsletters. And while he was in the Bahamas, he starts sending us gifts, which was so kind of him. He was such a kind man. And one of the things I'm going to show you he sent us was this menu from the plane, the BOAC aircraft that the whole crew took from London to New York and on to the Bahamas. And actually, if you look inside, it says, for all in Philly, love Victor Spinetti, at present working on Beatles 2. Then here it says, it was called the Beatles Bahamas Special. Well, he said, see the back page for autographs of the four lads. And this is what Victor sent our fan club, all 4 autographs of the Beatles.
What an incredibly kind and considerate thing to do, to take the time to think about you and to go through that kind of effort. We need more stuff like that going in the world today, knowing the joy that it would bring to you guys, right? To think that far ahead is unbelievable.
This was but he was such a kind man. And later on, I interviewed him for the book in 2007 when I went to the Beatle Fest in Vegas. And he said to me, well, I was young too, and I was a fan too. I was a fan of Marlene Dietrich. I know what it feels to long for someone when you're a fan. And that's why he did this for us. And then it gets more interesting because, let me see if I can find this. Okay, it was my birthday in May. They were still filming Help, and they were now in London at Twickenham Studios. Well, before they got to Twickenham Studios, they were in the Alps filming, which you have a picture of, I don't know, of Paul in the Alps.
Yeah, there we go.
My mother, who knew Victor too, because everybody knew Victor by this time, she writes to Victor on location. She says, Patty's birthday is coming up. I would love you to give her a surprise. And here was the surprise. This is a postcard from the Alps, a black and white postcard. And on the back, it says, to Patty from Paul McCartney, happy birthday, love. And Victor orchestrated that. But it even gets better than that. They went to Twickenham Studio later to film the interior shots for the movie. Paul had a hairdresser there. They all had a hairdresser in Twickenham Studio. Victor sent me a lock of Paul's hair from the studio hairdresser. So,
Patty, so that's the clone of Paul standing behind you?
Yes, right. That this was a family joke. The family joke in my family from my ex-husband was, now you got his hair, you can clone him, right? So, but the funny thing is, of course, I was 15 years old when I got this. I encased it in plastic like a Catholic relic, and I put it under my pillow and slept with it for 2 years under my pillow. Of course. So that's how sweet Victor was to us. We had the fan club going for about the length of high school, which was 4 years, well, 3.5 years by the time we started it. And when we went off to college in 1967 in September, it broke up. We kept in touch with Victor. He also sent us the sweater he wore in A Hard Day's Night, which was a fuzzy V-neck sweater. When we were publicizing, there's a sweater. When we were publicizing the club and trying to get members, when we went to see Help, and it was 95 degrees out in the summer, my girlfriend Diane wore that sweater. We had taken fuzz off the sweater in advance, put them on little cards, and made like intro cards to our fan club and gave them out to the girls in line going to see Help. So we had a real marketing effort going, and Diane almost fainted in that sweater because it was 90 some degrees out in Philly that day. So she and I always chuckled about that sweater, and it was, you know, part of the funny information on our fan club. But well, our fan club did break up, as I said, after 1967. I always stayed in touch with Victor. I visited him in London in December 71, January 71, 72. And we stayed in touch through phone calls and letters until I met him at Beatlefest in 2007. And I said, Victor, I need to interview you again for the book. And there's an interview with just him in the back of the book, because I just wanted to find out other things about him. And we were friends until his passing. He was 83, I believe, in 2012. He passed in Wales, and we were friends up until his death. And I miss him to this day. He was a wonderful
Victor
man.
was such an important person in the story of the Beatles because he was in 3 of their movies.
Yeah.
And he was in, I forget what video it is, but it was a solo Paul song. He was in a video for that in the 70s when Wings. I was just looking at some pictures. I was like, there's Victor. What's he doing in there? I didn't realize, but you know, he remained friends with them long after the Beatles broke up. So
yeah, he actually did. There was a show in London on stage about John Lennon that was John Lennon was, it was, the theme was John Lennon something or other.
It was Victor, in his own right. It was his, about his book, his first book. That's
Victor
right.
directed it. Victor had he did a lot of small things for them that you didn't hear about, you know.
And Pat, you might know this. I don't know if this is true. Did Victor get asked to be in A Hard Day's Night to begin with because it was Louise, George's mom's favorite actor?
Yes. Yeah. What happened? Yeah. I was told that Victor, George said to the gang that my mom loves Victor Spinetti, and he's going to be in all the movies, something like this. So Victor was so happy because he didn't even know that George's mother was a big fan of his. It was George's mom, so
Right.
he was in their world for a long time.
Right. So we have Mrs. Louise Harrison to thank for for Victor being, and he did such a good job in all the movies. When I met him, I want to say it was in 2007. I met him at the Beatle Fest in Chicago. He was promoting his book, and I asked him to say my favorite line from Help. Like, with a ring like that, if I could, dare I say it, ruled the world, and he happily said it for me, and it just, like, it still makes my day. Like, it's still just thinking, like, that's my favorite line.
Did you record it?
I'm trying to get a firm understanding of that outfit. So, can anybody explain? Is that a black turtleneck and some sort of sweater, and is that a pocket watch? What in the world? Did he go visit the Wizard of Oz and he gave him that clock? What are we dealing with here?
It was his costume for the movie A Hard Day's Night as the television director. He was keeping track of the time until the show started.
Yes.
Yeah, and the sweater actually went right up around here, and then I think he had a turtleneck underneath it. It was a very heavy, sweaty sweater, believe me. And I just wanted to show you, this is the cover of his autobiography, of Victor's autobiography, and on the back is a picture of Victor and John from Help. And there's a little story with this I have to tell you. The caption says, "Hey, Vic," said John, "you know, we're really impressed with your fan club. Do you think we can join?" And actually, the story behind this, and I think it's in the book, if I recall too, is that we asked Victor when he was on location with them in the Bahamas, could we send membership cards? We had membership cards for the Victor Spinetti fan club. And could we send 4 membership cards for John, Paul, George, and Ringo? And Victor was tickled. He said, send them. So we sent them by mail, snail mail, and the Beatles got them. And of course, this was a little ironic joke that John said about Victor's fan club, because he had fan club membership to Victor's fan club.
Oh, that's that's great. I remember hearing him tell that story.
Yeah. It's so funny. You know, the funny thing, which you have to keep in mind, and of course with all of us telling our stories today, is we were 14 and 15 and 16 years old when this all happened. I mean, that blows my mind when I think of that now, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, let's look at your picture here.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's Pat.
Oh, there you are.
That's George and me. But before I say anything else, I have to say, this is Sarah, if I can get it in the frame. This is Sarah's book. You need to buy this book, everybody. This book explains fan clubs like you have never heard them explained before. When I'm reading it now, and I feel like I'm reading my own life.
Well, you
because
are.
I lived all this stuff in that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's available on Amazon, right, Sarah?
It is. Yes. It's available on Amazon, and I appreciate you saying that, Pat, because it was important for me to get the approval of people that were actually in the Beatles fan clubs.
And when people are on Amazon and they're adding things to their shopping cart, are there some other books written by these lovely ladies that also they should add to their before they check out?
Marti wrote 16 and 64.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat wrote 2 books. Do you want to know a secret? And do you promise not to tell?
I do. What's the name of the book?
Here it is.
Oh, that's the name of the book. All right.
Do you want to know a secret?
I've been watching too much Abbott and Costello. You want to know a secret? Excellent.
And the follow-up, which is called Do You Promise Not to Tell?
Very nice.
And Patti wrote The Diary of a Beatlemaniac.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Wow. All right. Excellent, ladies. I'll go ahead and add links to those.
Which is based on her own diaries that she wrote as a teenager.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
You get to read the diary of a teenager there.
Yeah. That's, boy, were we innocent? That's all I can say. Right? back
Well,
then.
I bet at the time you didn't want anyone to read it.
No, of course not.
And now you published it as a book for the world to read.
Yeah, actually, there's an insert in there where my mother had looked at it, and I was so mad, and I wrote about that in my diary that somebody's been snooping in my pages. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fascinating way to write a book. I mean, nowadays that opportunity doesn't exist. You just look at a teenager's Instagram or
Right.
Facebook, and there's their
Right.
diary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me also just say that if Sarah was a first generation Beatle fan and had a fan club, for sure I would have joined it.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Because it would have probably
That's
been the
right.
best one ever.
Well, the whole time I
Yep.
was researching it, I thought I so would have ran a fan club. I totally would have done this. I would have had the newsletters and the mailing in
Yeah.
and have
Well,
club activity.
the interest is never ending. People are still going to be celebrating the Beatles in 50 years and 100 years.
Yeah.
And I even think that the idea of saying they were ahead of their time makes no sense to me, because there hasn't been a point yet where anybody's caught up and said, oh, in 2012, they're finally making movies, music like the Beatles. Like, no, they didn't. They never did. It was only the Beatles that did it. And even
Right.
for a while on Facebook, my page was the Friar Park fan club, and there was endless information just talking about Friar Park on so many different aspects. And so, yeah, we all have a great shared interest here, and it's amazing how new information still continues to sort of appear, sort of manifest out of the clouds. It's like, wow, I never heard
all
that
the
before.
time.
Yeah.
That's
All
right.
the time.
So what do we got here? What's this lovely photo? That's Mr. Harrison there to the left, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's me when I was 20 years old.
How old?
20. Just
Oh.
barely 20.
Wow.
I went to England the first time. My birthday was in May and I went in July. So I was just barely 20.
And it was in, what year was this?
1968.
Okay, well, I will not ask you what date your birthday is, but since it is May during the date of this recording, happy birthday, Pat.
Oh, well,
Yours
thank you.
before
No,
it.
it isn't. It's not till the 28th, but thank you anyway.
Okay.
Happy birthday.
So
And I
where was
will
this?
at that time be 3/4 of a century old.
Wow, good for you. Was this photo taken at Kinfounds or somewhere else?
No, it was it was taken at Kin Farms, in Esher.
Wow.
And should I tell the story that leads up to how I got the fan club or started the fan club and all that?
No, that sounds boring. Let's skip to something else. Of course, Pat. Of course, tell the story. This is awesome.
All right. Well, it started when I used to go to American Bandstand. I lived in a suburb of Philadelphia, and I was just like 14, and the age limit for people who could go there was like between 14 and 18. And a lot of kids ended up there earlier, and like I knew people that were 11 that actually showed up there and actually got in. All they had to do was do their makeup right, Anyway, I was going to American Bandstand. I was watching American Bandstand all the time.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. When did you start going to American Bandstand? The late 50s or the early 60s?
1963.
1963. Okay.
I only went for about probably not even a year.
Okay.
But by the time I was going to it, it was already not live anymore. They used to do it live 5 days a week after school let out. But by the time I started going, they were taping them on weekends. We'd go there and they'd tape maybe 3 shows or 4 shows, and then they'd be shown during the week. But anyway, my girlfriend and I, we really wanted to go to this badly. And one day I came home from school and my mother said that she had called American Bandstand and she said they're sending some tickets in the mail. I thought, oh my God. And so my parents took us down there and we were let in, and we thought we had died and gone to heaven, of course. And anyway, we ended up going as many weekends as we could. Sometimes my parents didn't even take us. We just went on the public transportation, which at the age we were was like unheard of for people in the suburbs. And but strangely, our parents let us do it. Anyhow, um, the bandstand, Dick Clark was moving bandstand to California in 1964. And we were not happy when he announced this. I mean, as soon as he finished his announcement, everybody ran to the area where they give out tickets for the following week so that we could get tickets and be on the last show. And that date was January the 11th, 1964. And at that point, I had not heard of the Beatles. I might have seen them, I think, on the Jack Parr show, but didn't pay too much mind to them. Thought they were funny looking, and that was about it. And so I'm sitting in the bleachers. It's 1964 on January 11th, talking to this girl who was wearing a Catholic girl's uniform, a school uniform. And all of a sudden, Dick Clark starts playing I Want to Hold Your Hand. Something just turned inside of me. And at the same time, this girl that we were talking to pulled a picture out of her purse that was ripped out of Newsweek magazine. And it had a picture of the Beatles, and it said that these people were causing all kind of pandemonium in England. And I looked at the picture and thought, oh, they're kind of cute. But that music didn't go out of my mind. And then later on in the show, he played out of She Loves You. And, I was sold by that time. And, of course, the end of the show was very sad. Everybody was in the parking lot crying and hugging because we didn't know if we'd ever see each other again, which for the most part was true. And it was like the following week, something just changed in America. All of a sudden, everybody knew the Beatles were coming in February. And it was like pandemonium was just growing by the day. And you could, the disc jockeys were blowing it up on the radio, and it was just crazy. And by the time the 7th of February came, I know I, for one, had my transistor radio up to my ear all the way on the school bus to school. And then, I'd have to leave it in my locker, and between classes, I'd go and check it, see if they arrived yet, because they were supposed to come at, I think, 2:30 or something. And they came, and I watched all the news on TV that night. I mean, I didn't watch news. I was like 14. I mean, who watches the news? And and anyway, it was just incredible. So I had fan clubs for people on Bandstand, and they started to die off when Bandstand moved to California. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just have one for my favorite Beatle. So I picked George, and yes, I decided to have a fan club for him. It started very small, as fan clubs usually do. I think I had about 6 people in it, all people that, I knew that lived around me. And at one point, I sent in an ad to Teen Screen magazine. That's when the lives of my family changed. Because all of a sudden, one day I came home from school and Mom says, what's going on here? There was like 20 letters in the mail. And the next day there was more, and the next day there was more and more and more. I ended up with about 1,000 members in my fan club.
Wow.
And here I am, this 14, almost 15-year-old girl. I'm still in high school. I get $5 a month allowance. How am I going to handle this? I just say I could not have done this without 2 sets of parents. my parents and George Harrison's parents, because I started writing to his mother at the end of 1964, and she was overwhelmingly helpful. She would edit my newsletters to make sure everything in them was correct. She would send me contest prizes, like autographs and stuff that George touched, and, guitar picks, all kinds of stuff. She was like a really wonderful woman. And my parents, they couldn't do enough. First of all, they raised my allowance to $5 a week instead of $5 a month, and I only charged for this to join the fan club. Lifetime dues were 40 cents and 3 5-cent stamps, and that didn't go very far. And my mother, when I was in school, my mother found out a place where we could get stuff mimeographed. They did a terrible job, but they were the first ones I used. And I had to make up, all of a sudden we had these 1,000 people that wanted to join this fan club. And like, how were we going to do this with 40 cents and 3 5-cent stamps? It was like almost unthinkable. But my dad was in the Army, and he lived didn't live, he worked at an Army base nearby, and they had a dark room, and Dad knew how to do this, develop pictures, because his father was into that. So he took me over to first we had to get negatives made of some pictures that were in magazines, and the drugstore down the street would do that. So they got these negatives, and Dad booked dark room, and we went there one night. Dad also booked one of the privates to help us, and we mass produced pictures like you wouldn't believe. And my mother, meanwhile, was working with the mimeograph stuff. I typed up the stencil, and this was mimeograph. This was not, you may have heard people, I doubt if you would, but people referring to spirit duplication. That was based with alcohol and turned out like purple. I was using a mimeograph, which took ink and turned out black. And it was a mess, to say the least. You had to pretty much wear a lab coat, or your clothes would get filthy. And somebody, I don't even remember who, offered me to, they said, we can either sell you this mimeograph machine, or, it's old and everything. So we got this mimeograph machine. I don't remember if I paid for it or if I got it for free, whatever. Anyway, I didn't have a place for it, so I was working at the time at Ursinus College. This was after I had graduated. I was working at Ursinus College, and I was a secretary. And I told them I had this machine, and they could, we could use it in the office if I was allowed to use it after hours and do my newsletters on it. And my boss said, sure, no problem. So in came this machine, and I worked on it a lot. I had a lab coat that was covered with ink. It was an interesting time in my life. But fast forward to 1968. I planned I was going to go to England, and I was going to meet George. No doubt about it. I mean, nobody could tell me otherwise. I had been saying this since I was in high school. People in high school said, you'll never meet him, you're crazy. And they were wrong.
Obviously, here's a picture.
And I made sure they knew they were wrong, because I had their addresses, and I sent them this picture on a Christmas card that year. So they knew. But anyway, leading up to that picture, so I was, corresponding at this point with George's family, not just his mother, not just his sister, but also his sister-in-law. Some of these people had columns in my newsletter. George's mother was the biggest one that had a column in my newsletter because everybody adored her. And I mean, how could you not? She was this sweet little lady who gave birth to this beautiful man, you know? Anyway, I went to England with 4 friends who were also members of fan clubs. Um, Pat Simmons, one of them, she's still my friend. I call her my best friend. I can tell her anything, still to this day. And she lives in Ohio. And then there was, let's see, her friend Joyce Kilbane, and a girl from Chicago named Nancy Sharp, and a girl from Emmaus, Pennsylvania, named Sandy Meckes. 5 of us. And I sent a letter to George before we left, and I sent it certified mail. And it said, "We are coming to visit you on the 5th, be at your doorstep." So I didn't think that this would, that this was a problem. I mean, you should make an appointment to see somebody. It's the proper thing to do. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. It's important. I have to, as Peter Asher would say, I digress. I go back to 1966, where I sent my fan club charter to George's mother, who said she got it signed by George. He only signed his name George on it, and I wanted it to be more official than that. So what I did was make a revision of it and took it with me in 1968. And when on the 5th of on the 5th of August, 1968, we, Sandy and Pat and I went to his house. And yes, there's a current picture. Okay, I mean, not current, but updated. Anyway, we went to his house and knocked on the door, and his delightful housekeeper named Margaret came to the door, and I said, "We're here to see George." I sent him a letter telling him when we were going to be here, and she says, "Oh yes, you're Pat, aren't you? You have the fan club." I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, he can't see you right now. He's busy. He's getting ready to go to work. So you'll have to come back." So we said, "Okay." She says, "Maybe he can see you right before he leaves. Come back around." I think she said 3 o'clock. I don't remember exactly those details. But anyway, so we go back there, or we're heading back there. Actually, we're leaving his house, and we're walking up the road, and here comes this car. It's green Mini, and it goes past us really fast, and then it stops, and I said to my friends, "That's got to be George." And they said, "No, I can't be George." And he backs up right to where we were standing, and it was definitely George. And he opens his car door, and he looks out at the 3 of us, and we're just standing there like in shock. And he says, "Well," um, and he's pointing at us, sort of. And then he looks right at me and he says, "Wait, you're Pat, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I have your fan club. I'm the president of your fan club." He says, "Right, Pat." And he said, "I'm really sorry, but I'm in a rush to get to work today." He says, "Can you come back tomorrow and we can have a chat?" And like, we couldn't believe any of this, but he told us what time to come back, which was like 1 o'clock, I think. And I said, well, he put his hand out to shake, and I grabbed his hand. My friend Pat swears that I grabbed his elbow, but I don't recall doing that. But anyway, I shook his hand. I didn't want to let go of it, but eventually I did, so he could go to work and produce some more masterpieces. And suddenly he was gone, and I burst into tears because this is something I've been wanting for so long. to meet this man. So we went back to the hotel, and I sent telegrams to my parents and to some of the officers in my club, simply saying mission accomplished, which was kind of a play off or a takeoff on a TV show called Mission Impossible.
Possible.
Yeah, right. And I accomplished it. So, anyhow, the next day we came back as he's instructed, and he spent about a half an hour with us outside in the yard. And I guess we couldn't go in because he said Patti was still sleeping. And she must have been like me with insomnia. Either that or she stayed up partying all night. Anyway, he signed all kinds of stuff for us. And I handed him my 5 copies of my fan club charter. And he reads every line of it and then says to me, you don't have to do this. You can have Beatles USA Limited do it. And I said, I know, but I don't want them to. I want to do it. It's fun. And he says, well, it's up to you. And then I said, why? And he said, I just want to make sure that you don't sue me. I said, why would I sue you? And we all laughed. And that was the end of that conversation. But this picture is him signing the fan club charters. You can't see that it's the fan club charters, but if you look close, you can see the file folder. And that's the only thing I had in a file folder that day. Just, I mean, why would you put pictures in a file folder? I figured. Anyhow, that's how that happened.
So then you didn't stop the George Harrison fan club after you met him. It continued on. Yeah. And you went back a year later.
I went back a year later, 1969, and took that picture of John and Yoko at EMI Studios. The way it worked was when you were over there looking, or you wanted to stay at EMI to see the Beatles, it was like a chain of command, I guess. I don't know what you call it, but somehow, I called it Beatle radar, that somehow we all knew just when they were coming and when they were coming out again. And sometimes we screwed up, but usually we were right. I remember one night having to stay overnight because they didn't come out until 5 o'clock in the morning. And they'd come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And, it was getting, British nights can be cold. And we spent part of the night in the lobby of an apartment complex across the way. The police would come every so often and scatter us. And then we'd all come back as soon as he left. And at one point, I remember sleeping under a truck, a pickup truck that had EMI on it. So, but we all knew. And this was one of the times when John arrived with Yoko. And Yoko was wearing a jeweled thing on her forehead, if you look close there. That was because she and John and their 2 children, Julian and Yoko, had been in a car accident like a week before or something. And Yoko had some stitches there, and she, I guess, didn't want anybody to see them. So she put that gold thing on her head.
So they were recording the Abbey Road album that summer in 1969 when you were there, right?
Yes, they were. The previous year they were doing the White Album.
The White Album.
Just out of curiosity, really quick. So this is his white Rolls Royce, right? And this is them coming out of EMI, right? Going into the studio?
That is his, yes.
Yeah, they're going into EMI.
Okay, now the others would drive themselves, right? But John Lennon wouldn't. Is that correct?
No, that's not totally correct. Sometimes Linda would drop Paul off, and then she'd go out. I hate to say this, but it's true. She would drive in one end of the parking lot, drop Paul off at the door, and then go out the other side. And by then, Paul was inside the building, and then she'd give the finger to all the fans. She was not a nice person.
Yeah, no kidding. So after John would get dropped off, so then
And
his
sometimes Terry Doran was George's assistant, and sometimes he would drive him.
yeah.
So,
And so how would
yes
you
and no.
how would you know when they were going to come and go? Were they on some normal schedule? Because you said earlier
Sort of, yeah.
that
They
you
would
leave and go
usually
shopping and then come back or something.
they'd usually arrive somewhere between 1 and 3 p.m. and they'd usually leave, around maybe 11 o'clock or so.
Mhm.
And so it was unusual that night that they stayed until 5 o'clock in the morning. They must have been on a roll. So we kind of knew that. So we would all like show up around those times. And we all knew that once all four of them had arrived, that we were free to, go elsewhere for the rest of the day, because they were going to be in there for a while.
Mhm.
And Mal Evans would sometimes come out, and he was very nice, and he would come out and talk to us. And I remember one time my friend Pat, she wore contact lenses, and she had one of these spells where I guess dirt got under her contact lens, and
Yeah.
she asked Mal for some water, or could she go inside and use the bathroom. And he went in and he brought her a glass of water to fix it with, and she was fixing it on I think the hood of Paul's car. So that was kind of funny.
Why
But,
do you ladies think that Mal was such a important and steady constant in their lives? Do you think it's because they trusted him because he was with
yes,
them before they became famous? I mean, but in his own life, was he very personable, very friendly? I mean, did they just like him
yes,
as well?
everybody liked Mal. He was the nicest man. He would do anything for you, except let you in the building.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a sweetheart. He really was.
Very
And he
cool.
was so dependable, so they could all
Yeah,
depend on him. So,
that's true. Yes. Actually, I remember the first time I met him was in 1966 at the Philadelphia Beatle concert, because he came out of before the show started, he came out of in a stadium. I forget what you call it, where you come out.
The
It's
dugout?
like a chute. What?
The
Dugout.
No, not the
dugout?
dugout. This is where like the Beatles would come out of later.
Okay.
Anyway, he came out there. It was like a tunnel. You remember that TV commercial for Coke where you see this kid
Oh, yeah.
talking to his idol in that type of area?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Mhm.
he came out there, and I ran over there because I recognized him from pictures I'd seen of him, because I hadn't met him at that time. And he was very nice to me, and he signed something for me. I took his picture. I didn't take it with me for some reason. Um, I don't know why, but back then you just didn't take as many pictures, and I think it was because you had to pay to get them developed, and you had to pay for the film. Not like today, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
totally
They only
different.
took 12 shots. You had to
Yeah,
keep changing the film. Yeah.
and you had to be careful what you were taking. Did you really want this picture before
right.
you took it?
Right.
Nowadays, you don't
Yeah.
even have to think.
I was good friends with Lizzie Bravo, and she would talk about when she waited to see the Beatles, and she said people like Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan, like all these stars would come and go, but she never took their picture because she was saving her film to take pictures of the Beatles.
Yeah.
Right.
And she didn't want to waste her film.
Yes,
That's
on
Well,
I totally
Jimi
understand that.
I never even thought of taking a camera that day when I went to the press conference. I never even thought of it. I got
You
these
weren't even
pictures,
taking a camera to the concert?
didn't take anything with me. No, because I
No.
never thought I was going to get in. But I got these pictures through a friend of mine in high school whose whose older brother was there with a press pass taking pictures, and they gave them to me.
Well, that
Yeah.
was lucky.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had any pictures of it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
I
Well,
used to
thank
take
God.
my Instamatic around. I had a little Kodak Instamatic, and I used to take pictures. And I got very blurry pictures of the first concert, you know,
Yeah.
in '64. But yeah, it was expensive to develop those 12 pictures, if you remember.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it was unless you were a professional also. I mean, who's walking around with a camera? When I was working on my book about Tittenhurst Park, and after John Lennon moved to New York, you know, Ringo acquired the property, and then he moved out of the country, and what he did is he would rent out the house to musicians. So you had like White Snake, Def Leppard, Judas Priest, Slade. You had all these different groups that would stay there because John Lennon had, you know, this residential recording studio, and so the band could stay upstairs, and then the band, you know, would go downstairs and record, and you had the kitchen there, so they would have a chef. And when I'm interviewing them, I'm like, "Do you have any pictures?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "How do you not have any pictures? I don't understand." And they said, "Well, it's just not how it was. You know, we're there to work, and to us, yes, it was John Lennon's house, but it was also like, you know, we're just going there to work. And you know, when you grow up in England, you know, houses like that are a dime a dozen. You know, to be in the house, it wouldn't be like us. You know, like me, I'd be taking a photo of every, you know, every door and doorknob. And so one
Yeah.
gentleman, I'm trying to think of it, I think it was Def Leppard. There's one gentleman who said to me, he goes, "Well, I did take a lot of Polaroids." I said, "That's fantastic." I said, "Can I see him?" He goes, "No." I says, "Why not?" He goes, "Who has those?" He goes, "You know, you take a Polaroid and then you just kind of throw it on the table, like, hey, everybody, I took this photo," and you forget about it. You know, it wasn't like something like,
Yeah.
hey, here we go, I took this great
Yeah.
photo.
That's true.
Right.
Like you said,
Yeah.
unlike today where you could take a zillion photos of, you know, of a flower as it blows in the wind. And it's like you only needed one. You know, you didn't need it on the left side and the right
Ah.
side and the bee on it and the bees inside, the bees on the top. But it's much easier now, but they also don't become as valuable. You know, here we are looking at this great photo right here. And who is this? So that's Mr. Harrison right there in quite a jaunty jacket, isn't it?
Yes.
And who's that lady there to the right in the lovely
That's me.
Yeah, the girl in the polka dot dress.
That's
Yes,
right.
that's me.
Oh, is that a
And
dress or is that a blouse? Yeah.
what?
Is it a dress or a blouse?
It's a dress, a
Is it a
mini
dress?
dress.
Wow. Okay.
But
That
in that picture, it's 1969, and he only had about 15 minutes to give us that time. But if you think about it, it was in the middle of all of that nasty stuff that started happening, you know, with the Beatles, and they all felt it, and you could feel it too coming off of them, you know, that they were not the same happy people they used to be. But George was nice to us nevertheless, and right there he was signing a birthday card that I say that he and my dad and I designed. My dad drew the picture for it. I scotch taped the pictures and everything together, and George wrote "Happy Birthday, George Harrison" on it, and I copied it and on cardstock and sent it to all the fan club members when they had a birthday.
I think that was one of the like most ingenious fan club ideas ever. Like
Really?
who wouldn't want to be a member of the George Harrison fan club and on their birthday get a little card that says "Happy Birthday" from George Harrison? I mean, that's
Yeah.
even though it's not his actual autograph, it is his real signature.
Yeah.
It is.
It's like a personal little George just wish me happy birthday. That's how I would feel. Send it
Yeah.
on my birthday.
That's ingenious.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that was 1969, and actually in 1968. Should I talk about this part yet, Sarah?
If you want to go there, you can talk about it.
The cease and desist thing?
Yeah, it's just not happy, but
No, it's ugly. In between 68 and 69, bad things happened with the fan club. With all the Beatle fan clubs, especially the independent ones. And I was still independent because I did not join up. Anyway, about 2 or 3 weeks after I came back from England in 1968, I got a letter in the mail on Nathan Weiss's stationery. He was the Beatles lawyer in New York.
Mhm.
And it said that I was, that he heard that I was running an illegal fan club for the Beatles, and for one of the, yeah, it just said Beatles, I think. And because it was a form letter, obviously, I found out later. And I needed to cease and desist immediately, or action would be taken. So I also was told that I could not sell pictures anymore because I'd been selling pictures. And that didn't bother me at all because most of the pictures that I was selling were ones that either I took myself or friends took and gave me permission to sell, or that the Harrison family had sent me and gave me permission to sell. I figured Nate Weiss has no jurisdiction over those pictures.
Mhm.
So um, I was upset, but I was confused because George had just signed this fan club charter saying I could do this. And now his lawyer is saying I can't. I mean, what gives here? So my dad, who writes who used to write wonderful complaint letters, he helped me compose a letter to this man in which we enclosed a copy of the charter. I never heard from Nate Weiss again, although many years later I did meet him for another reason, but I'll come back to that later. So, um, I never heard from anybody again, but Sarah can tell you that it wasn't a good time for fan clubs because now a lot of them really did have to shut down. Right, Sarah?
Yes, 144 independent fan clubs all received that letter, and the majority of them shut down.
Anyway, at that point, Beatles USA Limited wanted me to join up with them. And I said, no, 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 I'm not joining up with you. And Sandy Morse, who was the president at the time, drove me crazy. She was actually, I think she was called the director. But anyway, she about drove me crazy. She was always sending me letters, calling me on the phone. Please, 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 we can do this, and all this stuff. And I didn't want any parts of it. So one day, I got a letter in the mail from Jock McLean, who I had never heard of, and he claimed to be the Beatles' American road manager. So he sends me a letter on Beatles stationery telling me that he had just spoken to George on the phone and that George said he wanted me to join up with Beatles USA Limited, that it would be better for everybody. So I didn't know whether to believe this or not, but I had no way of finding out whether it was true or not. So I joined up with them very, very reluctantly. And I told them there were some things I was going to do that, if you don't want me too bad, I'll continue what I'm doing, I said I would continue to sell pictures. I told them why. And, there was some stuff I didn't tell them too. But I said, you will put official in front of the name of my chapter. I will be the official George Harrison Fan Club chapter of Beatles USA Limited, or official Beatles Fan Club, which came to be soon after that. So, I continued on. However, at that point, I think I had maybe 500, 600 members left. I don't remember exactly. But not all of them. One of the things was all of my members now had to join Beatles USA Limited, and I didn't like that. So I told them they had to do that, and the ones that did it, fine, they did it, and the ones that didn't, I still sent the newsletters to them. So I didn't, I didn't get rid of anybody just because of Beatles USA Limited. Beatles USA Limited had, had really an awful fan club at that time. And it was starting to get a little bit better. But, it still wasn't perfect. I thought mine was perfect. So, and there were other independent Beatles fans clubs that were also perfect. And they were a lot better than Beatles USA Limited.
Oh, definitely. The independent fan club had a lot more fun. They were a lot more fun. So I wanted to ask you girls if, see, here you are all today together.
Yes.
Did you know each other in the 60s?
No.
No, and
No,
But our paths crossed.
I think our paths must have crossed in some queue somewhere in front of some place, Pat. But it's funny because we actually know other people. We both
In
know
common.
the same people in common, but we didn't know one another, which is so weird, I think.
Yeah.
So how did you all meet and realize you had so much in common?
Oh,
well,
well,
I didn't get to England till 71, and I think maybe I might have met Pat somewhere because I know she came in 71 too, but I'm not sure
71.
because we
Yeah.
met so many different people, I didn't
At
get there until
EMI?
70. Could
And
Were
be.
you at
I
Were
mean,
you at EMI?
yeah, just briefly, but
I don't know
I
where
didn't
else I
hang out
would have
there
run
like
into you then.
I didn't
Were
hang
you
out
at
like you guys. I
at
was going
Apple?
to Chelsea, to Bibas and to King's Road and to all those neat places in London,
Did you go to
and
Apple and Savile Row?
no, I went to EMI. Yeah,
EMI.
EMI.
Because if
But
I
just
recall, not a whole lot was going on at EMI in 71
oh well, there you go. I did
because
walk
they'd
past
already
Paul's house
broken up.
times,
well,
but
Oh
I
yeah,
think
Paul's house. That's right. Everybody used to hang at Paul's house
Paul's
or
house
Apple.
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
in St. John's Woods, it was right
right.
around the corner from where I was staying, actually, St. John's Woods, and I
Oh,
walked past it at nighttime, going to a club. We go to a club down there. I was hoping to see them, but I never saw them, of course, at any of the clubs. But I was out dancing in 71 in London at night,
good for you.
I was just going to say that I've known Pat for many years. We kind of got friendly on a pilot. He was a disc jockey in Philadelphia on his website many years ago. But the Beatle Babes, the way we all got together, the three of us actually, was at Chicago at the fest in 2018, and it was so funny. We were on a panel, and you were moderating it.
Yeah,
Remember?
that's a picture of
Yeah,
I was
that was
moderating the
right.
film with you three.
And all of a sudden, we
Yeah.
figured, hey, we're all, the three of us were all first generation, or as I call us, vintage fans.
Yep.
We also were all presidents of the Beatle related fan clubs. We all wrote memoirs of our experiences, and we all saw the Beatles in concert many times. And two of you guys had met them. So that we got together and talked about this general idea that fans like us, the first generation, should band together to tell our stories for the other generations and through podcasts, radios, and fests and places like that. So we came up with the three Beatle Babes, and here we are.
Yeah, it just seems like you guys have been friends forever because every time I'm around you guys, you always just start talking about I know because you experienced a lot of the same things in the 60s, even though you didn't experience it together. I just think that's great that the Beatles would bring us so much together and allow us to make friends with people all around the world, and I love that. I love that the Beatles just bring so much joy and friendship to everybody. I think that's just a bonus. Like their music's great, obviously, but there's so much more to being a Beatles fan than just listening to the music.
Yes.
Back in the 60s when we used to go to England, a bunch of us would go to England. I mean, we'd meet people there and become lifelong friends with some of them. And
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
way back from the 60s to now. And we're still doing it, only we're doing it at the Beatle Fest.
Right. I don't know. I just think that's just great. That makes me happy that the Beatles have brought so many people to be friends with each other, and people even meet their husband or wife at a Beatles thing. And
That's happened.
Yeah.
I know, like,
And
it's
they were so creative, in all aspects, and in fashion and art. The Beatles just inspired me to go to college and take up fashion design. So I was into fashion design when I was in college, and photography at the Art Institute in Chicago.
and a
But
lot of
they
the skills that you learned running a Beatles fan club as a teenager just carried over into your adult lives.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Typing
mean,
for newsletters and running your mimeographs and all
gosh,
that was
yeah.
a skill that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
No,
let me just talk about that for a minute. When I was in the 12th grade, I guess, I was in a class called office practice, which I absolutely loved. And I got good grades in it because, for the most part, I knew how to do all this stuff before I even took the class. But anyway, I remember one of the last things that this man, the teacher, Mr. Williams, I think his name was, he taught us was how to write how to write a resume. And I had not had a job, a part-time job or anything, because my fan club was all that I ever did. I didn't have time to have any job. My parents gave me an allowance. I managed the best I could with, getting at the bottom of all my newsletters, I would type out, please send stamps, please send stamps, please send stamps, so I could mail these things. Anyway, on my newsletter, I keep saying newsletter, on the resume, I said, under experience, I said that I was the president of the George Harrison fan club. I therefore have organizing skills, copy machine skills, and I put all that stuff in there, and I turned it in. And at the end of the next class, teacher asked me to stay behind, so I did. And he said, let's talk about your resume. He says, this stuff about the Beatles or George Harrison fan club, this is not something you should put on a resume. People are going to think you're too immature and all that. And I said, well, I don't have any other experience. And so then I detailed what I did on a daily basis. And by the time I was done telling him what I did, he said, okay, you can leave it in. Let's just reword some things. And that was it. So, you learned a lot of stuff doing fan clubs, how to deal with people, how to organize paperwork, all kinds of stuff.
Just how to call an adult on the phone and talk to him.
Yeah.
Somebody you've never met before, like Norman Weiss in New York. We called them and talked to them, and we called Triangle Productions, and we talked, and just doing that was a learning experience.
But on the other hand, we could still be kids and be with other kids, and you pick up the phone and you call phone numbers and say,
have fun.
I remember we looked up McCartney or Harrison, I guess, in the telephone book, and called local people and just said, hello, is George there? Or is Ringo there? Whoever, you were calling. And you could still be goofy kids and do that kind of stuff, but you can also be serious and mature.
Yeah. See, in my case, I had one strange thing happen to me. Is I wanted a Beatle pass, a press pass to go to their first press conference in Philly in '64 in September. So I called a little local newspaper in my neighborhood. It was a weekly paper called the Globe Times, and I asked the lady editor, can I have a press pass? Because I want to, go see the Beatles and I'll interview, whoever's there at the press conference. And she said, we're such a small paper. We don't have anything like that. But she talked to me on the phone for a few minutes and she said, and she got my background, here I was like a freshman in high school. She says, how would you like to write a column for our newspaper, our weekly paper, which is, we'll call it Teen to Teen. So from that week on, and with my other girlfriend, Diane, who was the other co-president of the Victor Spinetti fan club, we started together writing and then separately, and then she fell off after a while. We wrote Teen to Teen, and it was about the Beatles. It was about music. It was about fashion. It was about anything that had to do with the teenagers at that era. I started writing more and more, and I loved writing. And that actually lasted, that column, until I was like halfway through college. And
Wow.
I went to journalism, university studying journalism, and I became a journalist for several decades. So the Beatles actually launched me into my career in a fun way. Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think that's just great. So the last time we got together, Marty couldn't be there, but we were at the Fest for Beatle fans a few months ago in New Jersey. And that was a good time. But when this picture was taken, I was so tired.
Don't worry.
We were all tired.
Stay awake.
And that was taken right before my escapade on the subway system of New York. Oh my God, did I get lost?
It's always an adventure. Always an adventure when Beatle fans get together, it seems. So Marty, your book is called 16 and 64, The Beatles and the Baby Boomers. Where can people go to get your book?
Well, it's on Amazon as an ebook only. And if you will go on my website, you will see my personal email on the website. And you can write to me for a hard copy of the book. And believe it or not, folks, that's me on the cover of the book. I can't even believe it. Way back when. So I did this little, I don't know what you call them. What do you call them? Avatar? What?
Your avatar.
Of the three of us. Yeah. Put it together for us, and we have our little Three Beatle Babes one that we have.
Right. It's in back of me. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't include that one.
And so that's my book. I wanted to tell you about Joe. Joe was my co-author. At the time, he was the reason I wrote the book, because he was my editor, and I was doing mock-up for the Elks newspaper. I was doing advertisement mock-ups, and we were talking about the Beatles one day, and I said, well, I met them. And he goes, no, you didn't. I said, yes, I did. I met them. And I says, I have 18 8x10 glossies up on in my closet shelf that I don't know what to do with. Well, he looked at them and he goes, why aren't you doing anything with these? I said, I don't know what to do with them. You can't put them on the internet, He said, well, you can write a book and include some of them in the book. And that's just what I did. Later, when a lady came up to me at the fest, she said, I want your little book for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I said, you don't want my book? And it's just a memoir of and she said, yes, we do, because all these other people over here are historians. And she said, and you're a primary source, so we want your book to go in the Rock and Roll. I think Patti and Pat's book are also in there too.
Yeah.
But
they just got my new book in too.
I got yours.
Yes, and Joe came down with ALS, and he wasn't able to go to the Beatle Fest. He was going to come with me to the Beatle Fest, he and my husband, and he wasn't able to come. And by the time I got back from the Beatle Fest that year, he had gone downhill so rapidly. He was now in a wheelchair. He was also a musician, and I said to him, well, guess what, Joe? I said, your book, you didn't make it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a musician, but guess what? Your book made it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was so happy that the book was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and just about 2 months later, he passed away.
Oh.
So he went downhill very fast with ALS. But anyway, so that was my story about how I wrote the book.
Right. And let's see, we have Patti. Where can people find your book, Diary of a Beatlemaniac?
Okay, my book could be on. It's on Amazon. It's also in a Kindle form, and I have an audio form now. So,
oh, do you?
Yeah.
And can you get that on Amazon as well?
I believe you can. My publisher had charge of all that, and she just did this a few months ago. So the other place you could get the hardcover is from me and my website, which is diaryofabeatlemaniac.com. All one word, diaryofabeatlemaniac.com. I do a blog every month too, if you'd like to look at that. And of course, the third and if you get a copy from me, of course, I'll autograph it. The third way is you could contact my publisher in Malvern, PA. It's Kinren Press. It's CYNREN, Kinren Press, and she would let you know also if you're interested in the audio version of it. And she knows more about that than I do. So and the book is in diary form. They were very cool, these people, when they published it. They actually printed a lot of pictures. All the pictures are in color. So there's all pictures of me that I took on my Instamatic camera back in the mid-'60s, and they're all in color. So my pictures are in color, and the book starts in 62, and it ends in 67. So it's kind of a coming of age story of a teenager as well as a Beatlemaniac book. So, I actually have a picture of my senior prom in here. I went all out with this kind of stuff. So
I love
there's me and my senior prom. There you go.
Well, all three of your books I've read, and they're some of my favorite Beatle books. I love, like Marty, you said, that's a primary source. I really, as a amateur Beatles historian that I am, I like the primary sources from first generation fans and their memories.
Sarah, you're no amateur.
Well, I don't get paid as a Beatles historian.
No, you are.
But
you're a professional.
And Pat, I just put your current book cover up.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my first book, Do You Want to Know a Secret, is available only on Amazon, nowhere else at the moment. So you have to go to Amazon for that. And this book is also on Amazon. It's also available from the publisher, which is called Tradition, spelled TREDA or DITION. It's
I didn't know there were other places to buy books besides Amazon. Okay, good to know. Let me update my notes.
Yeah. Tradition is a German company that I use to self-publish it.
Nice.
And let's see. And you can send it to my email address, which is mancuso_pat@yahoo.com. And get in touch with me on there, and I can sell you my book autographed if you want. Okay.
Excellent.
So, oh yeah. Also, I have a website called George Harrison Secrets with an S on the end .com, and that has a whole lot more pictures than are in my book.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Awesome. All right. Anything else, Sarah? These ladies have been so awesome.
I know, and they just love hearing their stories, and it's good to see them because I just love these girls. They're just such good friends of mine, and it's make me happy to talk to them.
Yeah, what a lot of fun. You guys have such great stories. It's so fantastic. It's fantastic that you made the effort, to write a book. The amount of initiative and drive and motivation and experience it takes to put together a book people say all the time, oh, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book. And people never do. And so good for all of you for going ahead and powering through and doing that.
I
and sharing
talked
the story.
to at least 12 people for my fan club book that weren't interested in telling me their story because they're going to write a book someday.
Yeah, never happened.
I, for one,
Well,
will never write a book again, ever.
you'll never write a book again. I don't blame you, but I probably will.
Well, look, some people never do. One's enough, right?
I'm
One is enough
supposed to write a
sometimes.
second one, but it's not about Beatles. It's a family history. But I've been so lazy. So, the Beatle book was easy to write. It kind of almost wrote itself, you know, but the next one has too much research to do. So I've been lazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge in their head, because people have asked me, you know, because I've written a lot of books, and the thing is that I have it worked out in my head so well that by the time I actually start, it's really just physical labor.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, how long does it take to just put this together? You know, I mean, obviously there's creativity involved and some research, but for the most part, it's like, okay, here's the story I'm going to tell. And it just kind of comes pouring out of you. And so awesome. So I will, like I said, I'll post the links below so everybody can see where to buy your books, which will be great.
You.
And I think Sarah and I both agree, you're always welcome. You guys, fantastic stuff here. This is a treasure chest. And we'll talk about other stuff in the future. So Sarah, anything else?
That's it for me.
All right, cool. All right, everybody. Well, listen, ladies, hang tight. I'm just going to end this, but, you know, we'll chat for a few seconds after we end this. So, all right. Well, listen, I'm Scott. That's Sarah. And this is the Beatles Beat. And this is this awesome interview we did with Patti and Marti and Pat. And we're happy to have them on board. Check out their books, please, and go out and buy them. And check them out at Beatles Fest, I guess, if you guys go again in the future or anything else. You know, we'll even share that information in the future if you guys are going to appear elsewhere. All right, you guys, until next time, we'll see you around.
Bye.
Peace and love. Okay.
Bye.